What if the very people sworn to protect Americans around the world were suddenly tossed aside like they were disposable, not retired, not reassigned, just fired in the middle of critical missions, left stranded in foreign countries without the tools to do their jobs?
That's not a movie plot.
It's what actually happened. And when the details surfaced in Congress, Senator Cory Booker erupted with a fury that shook the entire hearing. His words cut deeper than politics. He described families torn apart, veterans abandoned, and national security left wide open, all because of reckless decisions at the very top. Booker didn't hold back. He accused leaders of lying to lawmakers, of wasting taxpayer money, and of treating loyal public servants like trash.
Senator Booker. Yeah, we're good.
I cannot tell you how frustrated I am listening to the answers that you've given here that to me are utterly unacceptable. You know that there's a number of us who have served in executive positions. We have governors, county executive, as Coons has said. I ran a city during a recession, cut 25% from my workforce overall. I know what it means to do a RIF right, but this has been chaos. It has been cruelty. And your answers, frankly, have just lacked decency, as if you don't care about a lot of the employees whose lives have been destroyed after years, if not decades, of service. Now, I want to be very specific. Clearly, you're not standing up for people who've dedicated their lives to this country, but I'm going to stand up for them. And so let's talk about some of these people in real life and what you've done. A technical security specialist who just moved all of his belongings to Pakistan. He was fired as he was heading there to ensure our embassies in the region were safe. Hours after the movers left his home, he was fired, leaving a massive security gap of this administration's making. On Friday, you fired rapid response consular officers who deployed to provide emergency services for Americans overseas. The rapid response officers you fired were both actively deployed, leaving one stranded in Colombia and the other in Ankara without access to their emails or phones and without plane tickets home. The cruelty continues. One of the officers was a veteran with 24 years of federal service who had helped Americans during the Afghanistan withdrawal and the Sudan evacuation, that deserve better from you and the United States government for their service. At a time that there's a hot war in Ukraine, and President Trump is claiming to try to foster a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia, you fired the only Ukraine intelligence analyst and Russia analyst in the Intelligence and Research Bureau. You fired the executive director of the National Authority for Chemical Weapons Convention while we are trying to get the new government in Syria to locate and destroy remaining stockpiles of chemical weapons that threaten the security of that region and us. You fired human trafficking experts, including everyone with human trafficking experience in the Middle East, North Africa, and South and Central Asia, as if that is not an urgent crisis amongst humanity and for this nation. Apart from the national security implications of all of these firings, despite the cruel way that you guys executed them, the human toll is also staggering. One of the human trafficking experts you fired, showing the level of cruelty of your actions, has a wife who was just fired by USAID. She's pregnant. And now he just got fired as well. Two people trying to start their family with no income and now even their health insurance in limbo, who gave years of service to this country. You even fired all the staff at the Office of Casualty Assistance who are charged with repatriating fallen State Department personnel and their families, including those working on behalf of employees killed in the Benghazi attacks. We have a solemn and sacred duty to bring home bodies of American citizens who die while serving their countries and helping their help their families. It's a sacred obligation. Every major corporation I know, we've talked about business sector, knows that the most valuable thing they can do is get a pipeline of talent and personnel. I've talked to CEOs who've told me they spend between 25% and a third of their time recruiting talent, but despite telling us that the recruitment office would face no cuts, on Friday you fired the entire recruitment division, lying to us and eliminating that pipeline of talent. To the civil service and foreign officers who are watching this right now, hoping they can get some justification for the chaos you've created, for the cruelty you've put into place, for the lack of decency, I'm going to tell those folks right now that we are going to stand up for each and every one of those folks and fight for them at a time that China is doubling down on their investments in diplomatic corps, trying to fill every void that we create. You are devastating our corps, hurting Americans, undermining our sacred mission as well. And again, I don't trust you, Mr. Regas. Yesterday you said no one at Council Affairs would be fired. That's false. Over 100 Consular Affairs officers were fired. Again, you said no one with overseas assignments would be fired. That also is not true. I have examples of employees riffed all over this country who've had orders in hands. And we were told no diplomatic security agents would be fired. And again, not true. We are the United States Senate. We have an obligation for oversight, and you showed over the House hearing that even your statements lack veracity. I'm telling you right now, we are in a crisis in this country if you won't come here and represent facts. And to demonstrate that cruelty, to demonstrate the level of chaos and lack of decency of this administration, all of these cuts are being done in the name of saving taxpayers' money, but we're not doing that. We literally are giving tax cuts to billionaires and racking up the biggest deficits in my lifetime under this leadership that does not have fiscal responsibility. And the best demonstration of that is allowing millions of pounds or thousands of pounds of food that were supposed to save the lives of thousands of human beings, paid for by taxpayers, to spoil on docks. How is that in any way human decency? How is that in any way showing what we stand for as a country, that we would rather watch food spoil on the docks, taxpayer money absolutely wasted, while children around this world are dying because of your inaction and that of your agency? Sir, you have not been truthful. You are showing a lack of decency to people who've given decades of service, veterans. You've upended families. This is not the way we operate. It is not the decency that they deserve. And I will stand up and fight you in every way to make sure that the people you have hurt get from this country what they deserve: respect and honor. Thank you.
Senator Shaheen.
Can I respond to that?
Yes, you may.
I am deeply distressed by everything you just said.
I'm distressed by everything you've done, sir. I've watched you lie to this committee. I've watched you lie on the House side.
You did not.
I'm sorry, sir.
If you were here when I addressed Senator Merkley on that consular affairs statement, I told him immediately after that, the next sentence after that in my House testimony,
what about the other lies that I've said? I've pointed out. What about the other lies?
Diplomatic.
You want to go through them one by one?
Diplomatics.
And the more he spoke, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't just incompetence, it was cruelty dressed up as budget cuts. The question is how much damage has already been done, and who will be held accountable. When Senator Cory Booker took the microphone, the entire room shifted. His voice wasn't polished for politics. It cracked with anger, frustration, and raw disbelief. He looked straight at the officials sitting before him and accused them of something far worse than mismanagement. To Booker, this wasn't about policy differences or budget debates. This was about cruelty, dishonesty, and a complete betrayal of people who had given their lives to service. He called the firings chaos, he called them indecent, and he made it clear that what he was witnessing was nothing short of a moral failure. Booker reminded the committee that he had run a city during a recession, that he understood what tough cuts looked like. But this wasn't that. This was reckless, heartless, and unnecessary. He described employees blindsided after decades of service, families left without income or health insurance, and critical national security functions gutted at the worst possible time. Every word carried weight, because it wasn't just outrage, it was accountability in action. Booker wasn't interested in excuses. He wanted the truth, and he wanted the people responsible to face the human cost of their decisions. Booker didn't just speak in broad terms, he painted the human picture. He told the story of a technical security specialist who had packed up his entire life, preparing to move his family overseas to Pakistan to safeguard U.S. embassies. Just hours after the movers left his house, he was fired. No warning, no backup plan. The mission he was supposed to protect was suddenly left exposed. Then came the rapid response officers, the very people who fly out at a moment's notice to rescue Americans in danger abroad. Booker revealed that they too were cut loose. One was stranded in Colombia, another in Ankara, both left without access to their government phones or even tickets home. These weren't numbers on a budget sheet. They were flesh and blood Americans, tossed aside in the middle of deployments. To Booker, these stories weren't just examples of mismanagement, they were proof of deliberate cruelty. People who had dedicated their lives to protecting others were now abandoned, humiliated, and discarded without dignity. And with every story, his outrage grew sharper. Because if this was happening to our best and most committed public servants, what did it say about the values of the leadership that ordered it? Booker's next point hit even harder. He spoke of a veteran with 24 years of federal service, a man who had risked his life helping Americans during the chaos of the Afghanistan withdrawal and the dangerous evacuation in South Sudan. This wasn't some desk officer. This was a seasoned professional who had been on the front lines of crises, who had earned respect through action, not titles. And yet he too was abruptly fired, cut off with no regard for his years of sacrifice. Booker argued that this wasn't just cruel, it was reckless. Every veteran in government service carries institutional memory, hard-earned wisdom, and a deep understanding of how to operate under pressure. By discarding them without warning, leadership wasn't just hurting families, it was weakening the very core of America's national security. Decades of experience were erased in an instant. The message, Booker warned, was devastating. Loyalty, sacrifice, and dedication no longer counted for anything. To the people watching, it signaled that service to the country could be rewarded with betrayal. And to America's adversaries, it showed cracks in the armor, an opening created not by enemies abroad, but by reckless decisions at home. As Booker continued, the examples grew even more disturbing. Among those fired were human trafficking experts, people with years of specialized knowledge in regions where trafficking remains one of the most urgent and horrific human rights crises. These weren't optional roles, they were essential, positioned in the Middle East, North Africa, South and Central Asia, areas where trafficking networks are strongest and most dangerous. Yet overnight, every one of them was dismissed. Booker highlighted one case in particular that underscored the sheer cruelty of these cuts. A man who had dedicated his career to fighting human trafficking was let go at the same time his wife, working for USAID, was also fired. She was pregnant, and with both jobs suddenly gone, their income and health insurance vanished in a single blow. Two people preparing to start a family, left in uncertainty and fear, despite giving years of service to this nation. To Booker, this wasn't just bad policy, it was a moral failure. Eliminating these experts didn't just abandon victims of trafficking worldwide, it sent a chilling message that America was walking away from one of the darkest crises facing humanity, undermining both its global mission and its basic sense of decency. By this point, Booker's outrage turned directly toward the man in the hot seat, Mr. Rigas. He accused him not just of cruelty, but of dishonesty. Booker pointed out that under oath, Rigas had promised no consular affairs officers would be cut, yet evidence showed over 100 had been fired. He said no diplomatic security agents would be touched, but staff with critical overseas assignments were suddenly dismissed. Time and again, Booker listed the contradictions, calling them lies to Congress itself. This wasn't just about jobs, it was about trust. In a democracy, lawmakers rely on sworn testimony to hold leaders accountable. If the testimony isn't truthful, oversight collapses, and power goes unchecked. Booker's voice cut through the hearing room, "I don't trust you." It was more than a personal accusation, it was a statement that truth itself was on trial. Booker warned that when officials mislead, they erode the very foundation of democratic government. The lies weren't just insults to senators, they were betrayals of the American people. Every false assurance, every broken promise widened the gap between leadership and those they are supposed to serve. And for Booker, that breach of honesty was every bit as dangerous as the firings themselves. Booker didn't stop at the firings or the lies, he went further, exposing what he saw as the ultimate contradiction. Leadership claimed these cuts were about saving taxpayer money, about fiscal responsibility. But Booker pointed to the reality: massive tax breaks for billionaires, record deficits, and government waste at historic levels. Where was the responsibility in that? He described one of the most shocking examples: millions of pounds of food aid, purchased with taxpayer dollars to save lives, left to rot on docks. Instead of reaching starving families, it spoiled, wasted completely, while children around the world went hungry. For Booker, this was more than incompetence, it was a moral failure. To fire specialists while abandoning life-saving aid, all in the name of efficiency, revealed a government more concerned with numbers on a balance sheet than with human lives. His words drew a sharp line. This wasn't just about cutting budgets, it was about cutting decency. The contrast was undeniable. Resources were being squandered, lives were being endangered, and truth was being discarded. Booker's fury captured something larger, a system where cruelty was dressed up as responsibility and where the human cost was deliberately ignored. As Booker's testimony built to its peak, his focus shifted from individual stories to the bigger picture, the collapse of leadership itself. He argued that real leadership isn't measured by how many jobs you cut or how much money you claim to save. It's measured by how you treat the people who serve, how you honor their sacrifices, and how you maintain trust in the institutions that keep democracy alive. He warned that by discarding loyal employees without dignity, leaders were sending a message to every public servant that their years of service could be erased in an instant. Worse, it told America's adversaries that the country was hollowing out its own strength. While China was doubling down on investments in diplomacy and global influence, the United States was dismantling its own core, leaving gaps in security and credibility. Booker's words weren't just a critique of one agency, they were a warning about what happens when honesty and decency disappear from governance. Without trust, he argued, America's ability to lead, both at home and abroad, crumbles. And at that moment, the question became larger than one hearing. It was about the future direction of American leadership itself. Booker's words left the room heavy with a truth that couldn't be ignored. This wasn't just about the 1,300 people suddenly cut loose, or the families left scrambling to survive. It was about whether America still values honesty, accountability, and basic decency in its leadership. The stories he told revealed how decisions made behind closed doors ripple outward, destabilizing embassies, weakening national security, and shattering the lives of those who had given everything in service. And what makes it even more devastating is the contrast between the rhetoric of responsibility and the reality of cruelty: taxpayer money wasted, food aid rotting, and experts discarded while crises rage across the globe. Booker's outrage was more than political theater, it was a warning. If truth can be bent without consequence, if service can be betrayed without shame, then democracy itself is at risk of hollowing out. And that's why these hearings matter far beyond Washington. They remind us that leadership is not about cutting budgets or shifting blame, it's about protecting people, keeping promises, and upholding values that should never be negotiable. If you believe those values still matter, stay engaged, share this story, and demand accountability, because silence is what allows decay to spread.